Friends, will you pray with me? Oh, gracious and loving God, God of our mothers and our fathers, God of our ancestors, God of our past, God of our present, thank you for this community, for this body of believers. Thank you for reminding us that we individually and as a community are all part of the body of Jesus Christ. That Christian community that extends throughout this whole world, oh God. We give you thanks for your continued presence among us each and every day. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of each and every heart be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. So friends, I think that there's an assumption that we have when we come to church each week. That many of us, probably all of us, carry with us when we come to sit in the pews. We assume that the people sitting in the pew next to us believe in God. And for the most part, I would say, coming to a Christian community on Sunday morning, that's a pretty healthy assumption. But I want us to take a minute this morning and look around the sanctuary. I want you to look around at the faces around you, the faces around this church. Look around at the ones that you know, the ones you might want to know better. Now, most every single face that you see sitting in this sanctuary today has at one time or another struggled with doubt. Now, I want us to take a personal self-inventory today as well, as we think about our faith and we think about this morning. When have you experienced doubt in your own life? Was it last month? Was it last week? Was it yesterday? Perhaps you are experiencing doubt in God at this very moment. As human beings, we are very good at sharing our joys, our happinesses, the things that go well in our lives. But we are less comfortable in sharing our sorrows. We're not as good at sharing our grief. And we're definitely not very good at sharing our doubt. Now, I'm going to ask us to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable this morning, but I'm going to ask us to do it anyway. And full disclosure, I used to hate when my pastor would do stuff like this. But we're going to do it anyway because I think this is a good exercise for us, and it should be productive. I want you to turn to a neighbor, find a friend in the congregation. I don't want you to get up and move around, but kind of where you are. And take a minute, briefly, and share with him or her or them a time in your life when you experienced doubt in your faith. Well, these conversations are a little more robust than we probably thought they would be. We didn't fight. Well, that's definitely a positive. The point of this is I want us to showcase and to understand that we are not alone. At one time or another, I think if we're willing to admit it, most of us have faced doubts in our faith. And sharing these thoughts doesn't make our faith weaker. It makes our faith stronger. Because doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is not the opposite of belief. Doubt is a part of our faith journey, and can lead us to an increased faith. It can lead us to an increased commitment to each other and to God. Now, doubt is not something that we should ignore either and push it aside. Because I think if we think about it in terms of maybe a real-world metaphor or analogy, if we think about a ship at sea, when it gets really, really stormy, a ship will turn into those really strong waves to weather through them, because that's the safest option. And we can kind of learn a lesson from that we should face our doubts head on, hoping and praying and knowing that there will be calmer waters on the other side. Now, the Reverend Ray Pritchard, I think, sums this up nicely. He says, if you ever arrive at a place in your life where all of your doubts are gone and all of your questions are answered, take a deep breath and relax, because you've arrived in heaven. Now, if you are sitting here this morning and you are, I'm saying you, not us, because I'm not in this group. If you are one of the very few people, and I do believe these people are out there, that has never doubted your faith, today's words are for you too, because they will help you understand your fellow Christians a little better. So when I was a teenager, I began to put the words, learn the words to put to the inner feelings that I had had throughout my entire life. What had been stirring in me, but I could not name. And when I realized that those words, that I was a gay man, knowing that made me feel even more isolated from my church community. The church of my youth had a very exclusive theology. Of course, teaching that LGBTQ people were somehow innately sinful and unnatural in some way. Now that caused me to have great, great doubts in God. Because I kept wrestling, how could a loving God create me in God's divine image and then exclude me from eternal life? And for a long time, I thought that I did not believe in God. For a long time, I thought that I was an atheist. And I thought this because I had confused my doubts with unbelief. Those things are different. I thought that having doubts in my faith was the same thing as rejecting God. Because I was never taught that doubt was normal. That doubt was what it means to have a mature faith. And even though my doubts were caused by a false theology and a bad teaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ, I spent many years in a season of doubt, searching for the movement of God in my life. I spent many years wondering if God loved me. Now, usually when we talk about doubt in our Bible, who's our go-to person? Thomas, right? We always go to Thomas when we talk about doubt, because he's the one who doubted the resurrection of Jesus. He's the one we even call the doubting Thomas, right? In vernacular English, because he needed proof. But Thomas was not the first. We have many instances of people doubting their faith and struggling with that doubt in our Bibles. But, as Judy Andrews liked to sing in that song in The Sound of Music, let's start at the very beginning, right? A very good place to start. So what was the first instance of doubt in our scriptures? Probably have a little bit of a clue, considering we read Genesis 3 this morning. It happens pretty early on, chapter 3 of the book. But before we talk about Eve this morning, I want to give us a disclaimer. For centuries, the church has put so much blame on Eve for all of humanity's failures. She's been blamed for all of the brokenness, all of the sinfulness that we embody. And because of that, a lot of blame has been placed on women in general. Now, the story of Eve and her sin in the garden has been lifted up to subjugate women across this planet for centuries. So I want to be very clear that Eve, and thus all women, are not the author of sin. We should not scapegoat Eve. It's not what we will do today. It's not what we will do in the future, because it's not what we teach, nor is it what we believe. I just want to put that disclaimer out there. We're using Eve as our example. We're not dissing Eve. Because Eve's like us, right? Eve was a human being. So Genesis 3 is not an indictment on Eve. But I want us to look at a different translation, I think, that livens up this story a little bit. This is the Message translation. It's a paraphrase from Genesis 3. Now, the serpent was clever, more clever than any wild animal God had made. And the serpent spoke to the woman, "Do I understand that God told you not to eat from any tree in the garden?" So the woman said to the serpent, "Not at all. We can eat from any of the trees in the garden. It's only about the tree in the middle of the garden that God said, 'Do not eat from it. Don't even touch it, or you will die.'" So the serpent said to the woman, "You won't die. God knows that the moment that you eat from that tree, that you're going to see what's really going on around here. You'll be just like God. You'll know everything, ranging all the way from good to evil." Now, when the woman saw that the tree looked like good eating, and she realized what she was going to get out of it, that she'd know everything, she took and she ate the fruit. And then she gave some to her husband, and he ate. There's a lot that we can learn in this story. There's probably 50 sermons there. But Eve is really just minding her own business, doing her thing in the garden, until she's confronted with this serpent. Now, the serpent plants these seeds of doubt in her faith as she's wandering along, right? Because she knows, and she tells the serpent, and by extension us, that God has forbade her to eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. And she even knows that eating of the tree in the middle of the garden will cause her to die. So then the serpent lies to her. And the serpent, because of that lie, she doubts what she had believed. She doubts what God had told her. And then her doubts lead her to disobey God. Now, sometimes our doubts can lead us astray. We can't hide from that fact. Sometimes our doubts lead us to sin. But that does not always have to be the case, nor do I think is the case most of the time. Because that doesn't have to be what we will do. Eve's doubts in this story are not the problem. I think the problem comes along when Eve doesn't explore these doubts, doesn't discern what's going on. Because she spent no time trying to figure this out, about what these doubts meant to her or how they related to her faith. She just skipped right ahead and ate the fruit. She immediately acted on the doubts that were planted by the serpent. And if we think about that ship metaphor again, she didn't turn the ship into the waves. She went the other way. So things for her got really rocky, right? I think the lesson that we can learn from Eve in this story is that we can even doubt our doubts. Wrap your head around that one, right? Doubt your doubts. The Reverend Pritchett says that we should not cast away our faith simply because we are in a valley of darkness, a valley of doubt. All of us walk into that valley from time to time. Some of us will spend a great deal of time there. But when we find ourselves in that valley where everything is uncertain, remember these 3 words. Just keep walking. Just keep walking. Because nothing is gained by camping out in the valley of doubt, in the valley of darkness. The only way out is to keep walking through the valley. And every step forward is a way for us to doubt our doubts. Because soon enough, if we just keep walking, we will get through that valley and the light will begin to shine again. That's a hard lesson for us to learn when we're young or the first time that we're traveling through a season of doubt. But as we have to weather these times in our lives, we gain a little more experience, knowing that we may not feel the presence of God, but that God is walking that valley with us. Because the seasons of doubts will come and go in our lives, my friends. Of this I have no doubt. But even when we doubt that, I truly believe that our God is walking with us. It is my hope and my prayer that each of us this day and every day forward, knowing that when doubts creep in, that we just keep walking. May it be so, my friends. Amen.